Hello student, my name is Gaetan. Today we are going to discuss grade 12 history, unit 9, African National Liberation Movement and its independence since 1945. This unit includes the following subtopic. The first one, Pan-Africanism since 1945. Second, the National Liberation Movement. The third one, the Organization of African Unity. The last one, the Contemporary History of Africa. After the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain about the movement of Pan-Africanism and its contribution to the national liberation struggle for African from colonialism. The other one, mention the African nationalist leader and identify the African countries which achieved independence through violent and non-violent struggle. The first lesson, Pan-Africanism since 1945. Student, what meant by Pan-Africanism and what was the purpose of Pan-Africanism movement? Who were the founder of Pan-Africanism? Let us see each one by one. First one, the meaning of Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism was a movement which started in the pre-1945, but it focused on the liberation of African from colonialism. The term Pan, mind you students, the term Pan derived from Greek word. Pan means all. Pan-Africanism means all African. The Pan-African movement expressed two main important ideas. The first idea, it is an expression for desire for African unity. Second, it aimed at fomenting a sense of unity among all black people of the world whose ancestors originally came from Africa. Second expression assumes a common brotherhood of all black people of Africa, North America, South America, and West Indies. The idea of Pan-Africanism originated from outside from Africa. The origin of this movement was in the New World. The New World means in America. The movement originated in America and Caribbean by the people of African descent. These people felt that they had been made homeless by their transfer from foreign countries and made to live in a social environment unknown to them. Then the black people wanted to have equality with the other race and wanted justice. Hence, the Pan-Africanism was a form of black people against racism. At the main aim of Pan-Africanism to against racial segregation in the New World, especially in America. They thought that Africa as a continent where the black people lived in happiness and freedom. But different conference was held. The first and earliest Pan-Africanism conference was held in London by 1900. The conference was organized by a Trident or West Indies lawyer, Sylvester Williams. The participant of the first Pan-Africanism conference was from America and West Indies. Before 1945, 4 Pan-Africanism conferences held in Paris, London and Brussels, London and Lisbon, and New York City. In 1945, the 5th Pan-Africanism conference was held in London. Before that, the 2 famous Pan-Africanist leaders was Dr. William Ivor Garrett Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. But there was disagreement between them, between Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. The ideal difference related with a disagreement between Du Bois and Garvey was on the future of black outside from Africa. The ideal difference of Du Bois and Garvey. Du Bois, he was an African-American scholar and writer. He came to be known as the father of Pan-Africanism. The father of Pan-Africanism was Du Bois. He maintained that the black outside from Africa should struggle for the respect of their own right in the countries they lived in. And he was an organizer and preacher of Pan-Africanism movement. While the idea of Marcus Garvey, he was a Jamaican who moved to and lived in USA. He was the founder and leader of Universal Negro Association. Garvey insisted that the only future of blacks in America and West Indies was return to Africa. Return to Africa movement was organized by Marcus Garvey. Then Back to Africa movement was organized since 1914. The other idea of Marcus Garvey, he organized Universal Negro Improvement Association. It was established in 1914. Was meant to promote the Back to African movement. At the beginning, the idea of Marcus Garvey got international recognition. Later, this idea was failed. At the end of, he died in USA by the hand of white racists. White racists killed Marcus Garvey in America. In 1945, the 5th Pan-Africanism Conference was held in Manchester. It marked the beginning of new chapter and new tendency for African independence. The conference was important and held in two respects. The first respect, in the history of Pan-Africanism, Africans from the continent participated in this conference. Those participants were, the first one, Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta from Kenya, Ninami Dazko from Nigeria, Julius Nyerere from Tanzania, Abraham from South Africa. Those are native African, and they learn abroad and involved in the Fifth Pan-Africanism Conference. This conference seriously demanded the independence of Africa. For the first time in 1945 at Manchester Conference, the Africans, especially Pan-Africanists, needed the independence of the continent from colonialism. In the effect, the decision of this conference provided a slogan which brought Africans together in the struggle for independence. The leading idea of the Fifth Pan-Africanism Conference was United Africa, United States of Africa. This idea was right from Kwame Nkrumah and Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. But the nationalist leader wanted to create a united Africa. Among the nationalists was, as I told you before, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania and Kwame Nkrumah of the former Gold Coast, nowadays Ghana. But opposite to this idea, however, the tendency began to develop after independence. In many countries, nationalists began to concentrate mostly on their own countries. The division of Pan-Africanism became a series of problems which troubled the unity of African state in the post-independence after 1916. This is all about the ideal difference between Marcus Garvey and the contribution of Pan-Africanism. By the way, the background of Pan-Africanism was Ethiopianism. Ethiopianism means in 1896 at the Battle of Adwa, Ethiopia defeated Italy. Starting from that, all black people of the world started to struggle against the colonial power to get independence like to Ethiopia. 9.2, the National Liberation Movement. What do you think the method of struggle that were used by African for liberation movement? There are two forms of struggle during the time. The first one, non-violent form of struggle. Second one, armed struggle or violent forms. Several factors affected the nature of national liberation movement in Africa. The most important were the attitudes and political tradition of colonial powers. The attitudes and political tradition of the former colonial powers, especially the colonial powers Britain, France, Italy, Germany, Portuguese, and Spain. Those European powers colonized Africa since 1884, starting from the Berlin Conference up to 1960s. The national liberation movement took mainly into two forms or into two courses, violent and non-violent. The violent, a place where high number of white settlers lives, especially in Algeria, Kenya, and western part of Africa, as well as southern part of Africa. There are high number of white settlers. While non-violent form of struggle in the Western Africa because of small white settlers. It was an African struggle for justice as well as human and democratic right. In the Western Africa, where both the French and British are colonies, independence fairly in the smooth ways. It had no white states, especially in the western part of Africa. During the Second World War, there was an international agreement. There was slogans. That slogans to struggle against the Axis power, struggle against Germany, Italy, and Japan. At that time, there was an Atlantic Charter. The Atlantic Charter explained that promised to respect the right of all peoples to choose the form of government under which they will live. African nationalists respect this agreement, but the Western power did not accept this idea. Britain was well disposed towards granting independence to her colonies and national struggle, conflict between became better. The main reason for this was the disagreement how so on self-government independence should achieved in Africa. This idea was right from Great Britain. Britain maintained that it would take some time since she felt still had to train the nationalist, business running and modern state in Africa. But the nationalists totally rejected the idea of Great Britain. The nationalists agitated British West Africa, especially strong in Gold Coast or Ghana and Nigeria. They against totally the idea of Britain. For example, Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, those West African leaders against the proposal of Great Britain. Between 1945 up to 1954, better clash between African nationalists and Britain were observed mainly in Gold Coast and Nigeria. The nationalists pressure West Africa able to lead windfall of independence. The first country achieved its independence was Gold Coast, nowadays Ghana, on March 16, 1957. Ghana achieved its independence in 1957. The other one, October 1, 1916, Nigeria got its independence from British rule. April 27, 1961, Sierra Leone became independent. On February 18, 1964, Gambia became independent state. After 1945, France was aware of the need to grant more political and civil rights to these colonial powers of French West Africa. Then each colony in French West Africa was allowed to elect a territorial assembly. However, originally the French government did not plan to give independence for the African state. Then the French minister colonies made laws for French West Africa, but radical nationalists demanded independence in the Western Africa from French colony. The French president Charles Gaulle became French president, and a new French constitution was issued that the same year in 1958. Gaulle intended to transform from French Union into French Commonwealth. The French Commonwealth nation, the community would have an executive council. The council would be responsible for the following things. For example, for defense purpose, foreign affairs, and economic policy. Then the colonies of French West Africa would hold a referendum for a new constitution. Then they were choose between voting yes or no. Yes, becoming an autonomous republic with French community. Mind you, student, if the country choose yes, becoming an autonomous republic with French community. When the country select no, becoming immediate independence from it, no would lose French economic and technical assistance. Only Guinea voted no because Guinea gets support from USSR or Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. Sékou Touré, he was president of Guinea at the time. He got support from Russia. Then on November 1916, all French West African colonies achieved full independence. The countries were Cameroon, Togo, Dahomey or Benin, Niger, Gabon, Senegal, Mauritania, Upper Volta, nowadays Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, nowadays Cote d'Ivoire, Ubangashiri, nowadays Central African Republic, Middle Congo, nowadays Congo Brazzaville, French Sudan, nowadays Mali, and Chad. Then in 1960s was considered to be an African year. Mind you, student, 1960s were the African year because many African states became independent in 1960s. Some African countries achieved its independence by violent armed struggle because of the existence of large number of white settlers. For example, Algeria. Algeria was a French colony since 1813 in the northern part of Africa. French administered Algeria as part of France. The white settlers were known as the colons or the colonists. 1 million settlers in 1916. French applied assimilation policy. British divide and rule policy. French applied assimilation policy. The Algerians had fought one of the bloodiest wars of independence, starting from 1954 up to 1962, 8 years of struggle. This struggle was led by Farhat Abbas and Ahmed Ben Bella. Ahmed Ben Bella and Farhat Abbas was the leader of Algerian's War of Independence. Farhat Abbas, he was the leader of Algerian War of Liberation. He was trained for French army. He was a peasant origin. He organized the Algerians peasant and struggle against the colonial power since 1954. The other one, Ahmed Ben Bella. Ahmed Ben Bella set up an organization called Revolutionary Committee for Unity and Action to fight for independence. Later, Revolutionary Committee for Unity and Action changed to National Liberation Front, FLN. FLN in French, Fronte Libérationnelle Nationale. In English, National Liberation Front. The National Liberation Front, FLN, became very strong mainly because of financial assistance got from Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, and Arab League. Those are supporters of FLN since 1954. The slogans of Algerian Revolution is not and cannot be mere fight for the conquest of political power, but for social, political, and economic change through revolution. Independence cannot be an in itself. Independence cannot be in and itself. The Algerian workers are fighting in order to guarantee land for peasant, work for workers, better living conditions. The Algerian War created serious crisis in France. The downfall of the Fourth Republic in France was partly with the Algerian War of Independence. By the way, the Algerian War of Independence was started in 1954. At the same time, France was war with Vietnam in 1954. France versus Vietnam, the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. At the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, Ho Chi Minh defeated France in Indochina, or nowadays Vietnam. At the same time in Africa, starting from 1954 up to 1962, Algeria struggled with France. Then in 1962, Algeria became an independent state. Before independence, in 1959, Charles de Gaulle offered Algerians to choose three things. The first one, integration. Second one, absolute independence. The third one, independence in cooperation with France. The FLN made it clear that they were fighting for absolute independence. Then in 1960 and 61, colonists and some French generals attempted to overthrow Charles de Gaulle. Both in Algeria and France, terrorist organization called a secret army to attack all who favor independence of the Algeria. On March 18, 1962, the FLN signed Ivan Agreement. French and FLN signed the Ivan Agreement. It ended the Algerian War. On July 1, 1962, Algeria became an independent state. The first president of independent Algeria was Ahmed Ben Bella. Ahmed Ben Bella, he was the first president of independent Algeria on July 1, 1962. Student, this is all about today's topic. Answer the following questions. The first question, what meant by Pan-Africanism? Second, explain the ideal difference between Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. Third one, mention the nationalist leaders of Africa. Fourth one, list the 5 conferences of Pan-Africanism. The last one, explain about the Algerian War of Independence. Student, until next time, goodbye, stay at home, thank you.